We are Össur Academy, bringing you virtual learning direct to your desktop or mobile device, wherever you are and whenever you need it. We believe in the value of appropriate and relevant clinical education and have a wide range of learning formats specifically for you. Whether this is for your own CPD, product insight and awareness, or detailed training relevant to your own clinical needs, we provide a huge range of remote learning opportunities specifically tailored to you. We bring together key opinion leaders sharing insights into orthopaedic and prosthetic clinical pathways, our own clinical and professional sales teams offering you detailed product insight and evidence-based education, large-scale secure webinars professionally managed with multimedia content, virtual fittings and user demonstrations offering remote interactive support to colleagues and customers in their own workplace, pre-requested one-to-one virtual meetings with our clinical teams providing real-time diagnostics and support, open meetings allowing for multi-site interaction and knowledge sharing. Contact us now to arrange your own virtual training and education meeting, and visit our website to browse our back catalogue of webinars and other online education events. We are Össur Academy, providing your educational needs.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our High Activity Solutions virtual session. Great to have so many of you give up some of your time this evening. I hope you're sitting comfortably, a cup of tea or coffee, maybe a wine, and I hope you enjoy our virtual session that we have for you this evening. So I'm at home tonight, and I'm going to hand over to our North Europe Academy team who are in our UK head office in Manchester. So good evening, Richard, Rachel and Ollie and Jordan.
Good evening, thank you everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening for our first evening webinar. Like Katie says, it's High Active Solutions today, and we've got about an hour. We've done all our rehearsals. We hope it won't overrun too much. We should be pretty tight this evening. But I'd like to introduce Rachel. Rachel's our physiotherapy, works with us here in Manchester, and also my good colleague Ollie. Ollie's a prosthetist. Some of you may know him, but he's both been working with the company for a long time. Today, I'm on the button, so I'm doing the cameras. I'm going to nip off and I'll let Ollie introduce you to the rest of the team. So hope you have a good show.
Thank you very much. I'd also like to introduce you all to Jordan, who's our demo user for this evening. We've known Jordan for a few years now. I think many of you would have seen he's been involved in quite a lot of our webinars over the past few months. And I'd also like to introduce my colleague Felix and some of his team in Germany. And he's going to be helping us with some of the running things on the running track. Unfortunately, it's just started raining, so say hi, Felix. Thanks.
Hey guys, welcome from Bavaria. First, I want to introduce to you Alba from Spain. She's our co-host today. We have Lars, our user. He's super fit on the blade. I hope still during rain. And Christoph, big support from Orthopädie Müller in Fürth.
Thank you very much. Perfect. So before we start, just a few housekeeping guidelines. You are in an Össur webinar today rather than a meeting. So this means the interactivity is not quite there. But if you do need to ask a question, we have a Q&A function which Katie's going to manage. Also, if you see a question there that someone's already asked that you would really like to be asked, please just use the thumbs up sign and it gets promoted to the top. We have certain points where we're going to stop and Katie can ask these questions to us as well. This is being recorded, so it will be available down the line in the future. So if any of your colleagues have missed it, then we can send them a link to watch it in the future. You'll obviously get e-certificates for this. Please check your junk box, because that's sometimes where they end up. So they are on the way, but sometimes end up in the junk. There will also be a follow-up questionnaire, and not to forget, we are also Academy in North Europe. We do have a YouTube channel, and also you can find lots of our previous webinars on our website as well. So on that note, I think I'm going to pass over to Rachel.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ollie. So we're going to start off talking a little bit about physical inactivity. It is a global issue, and I'm sure over the last 7 to 8 months, I think everyone's well aware of the effect that it has on people. So when we're looking at physical inactivity, we come back over here, we can see that 80% of the world's population of adults are physically inactive. And that means that we're not actually achieving our WHO, which is World Health Organization, recommendations of physical activity, which I'll come on to in a second. globally, 5 million deaths a year are linked to physical inactivity. And studies have shown that 50% of our waking day involves periods of sitting down. So particularly over the last 7 to 8 months, we've been working a lot from home. We're in perhaps non-optimal conditions at our computers. And this can add up to over 2.5 years, 2.5 months, sorry, of sitting down per year. So what happens when we're physically inactive? Well, as I said, we're spending lots of time on the computer, so we're getting poor postures, strained necks, achy shoulders, problems with the rest of our digestive system, so issues with things like an overactive pancreas, problems with heart disease risk increasing, an increased risk of cancers, poor concentration, and also poor circulation because we're not getting up and getting our blood pumping around. So physical activity guidelines that are all developed by the World Health Organization actually recommend for adults, which is over the ages of 19 up to the ages of 64, that 150 minutes should be sufficient in physical activity. Now, that may sound a lot, but actually we could break that down over 5 days to half an hour a day. That's not really that much, is it? That then leaves us 2 days in the week to actually continue doing muscle strengthening exercises, which again is part of our recommended activity. This could be something as simple as doing something like yoga, carrying our heavy shopping back from the supermarket, or actually some planned activity at the gym where we're actually exercising with weights as well. Now, when we're starting to think of our typical amputee population, this is going to be our adults over 65. Actually, they're supposed to be doing the same amount of physical activity as the other adults, except that they're supposed to include balance training as well. And this is because they're at an increased risk of falling. On top of that, our disabled and chronic diseases, the people who have those, again, should be completing exactly the same amount of physical activity. The only difference is that they say they should complete it as much as they're able to do so. So again, when we're thinking about our amputee patients, although they have exactly the same recommendations in the guidelines, the problem that they will find is that actually they're expending a lot more energy than, say, we would to complete our physical activity recommendations. Why do we need to be more active? What benefit are we going to have from it? So it's going to help maintain our weight in a healthy range. We're going to be able to complete our activities of daily living in a less fatiguing way because we're going to have a stronger cardiorespiratory system and stronger muscular fitness as well. It's also going to help by being physically active. It's going to help reduce rates of all-cause mortality. We're going to help reduce rates of conditions such as heart disease, stroke, dementia, metabolic syndrome, certain types of cancer, and also type 2 diabetes. So what about our amputee patients? That's what we're all here to know about, isn't it? What is our ultimate goal of rehab? Our ultimate goal with our amputee patients is to reintegrate them into society. And this could be as simple as getting up and walking, being able to participate more in our family activities, going out and socialising with friends, because I appreciate not much of that's perhaps going on at the moment. But actually, again, studies have shown that physical activity has been linked to enhanced community integration and improved prosthetic use. And partly this is because they're going to be fitter and stronger and able to walk around with their prosthesis and get the most out of it as well. It also means that they're going to have better gait, which shows that we're going to develop less compensations potentially, and that really are getting the physical, psychological and emotional benefits of physical activity. So again, as healthcare clinicians, we know that a lot of our lower limb amputees don't participate in physical activity already. And again, some surveys have been done, and again, these go back years, but there are some more recent ones from 2013 that actually show that a lot of our lower limb amputees don't participate because they're embarrassed, because of the lack of instruction on how to do certain activities or how to get that little bit fitter to be able to do what they want to do. Now, that could be through rehab. Perhaps we're not addressing those needs early enough on during rehab, or perhaps that's because actually when they're trying to join in with able-bodied people, that there are coaches there that don't know how to address the problems and complications that some of our lower limb amputees might present with. Again, typical lower limb amputee population are of a slightly older age, have a higher population that are smoking, and also usually because of a vascular cause of amputation. So the likelihood is that they perhaps weren't participating in a lot of these activities prior to amputation. And I think quite often this is why we tend to find it's only our sort of younger, maybe more traumatic amputees that are keen to get back into these sorts of activities. So thinking about our rehab, when we're looking at our patient's journey, quite often, especially with our younger, fitter amputees, what we're looking at is being able to get them up and walking. Usually when they've reached independence without walking aids, quite often they say, that's it, I don't need to come to physio anymore. You've got more patients that could do with your time. You know, I'm up and doing what I need to be able to do, so I'm good, I'll manage from here. However, there have been studies that have shown when patients are discharged from physiotherapy, the activity level that they're discharged on doesn't tend to increase anymore. So if we're discharging these slightly younger patients who have the potential to be a lot more active, and we're not reaching that highest level of activity at that time, are we actually engaging these patients later on through the rehab pathway? Now, when we start increasing these activity levels, the things we need to be aware of are problems such as perspiration, potentially some complaints of pain, some sores, fatigue, problems with swelling and cramping. How is that any different to what we would normally find if we started to increase our activity? The big difference here is that it stops patients wanting to participate. So when we think of what we need to be aware of to try and get these patients progressing with their physical activity, we need to be teaching them and educating them around residual limb care. Already we would have taught patients early on in our rehab about skin checks and maintaining good hygiene, looking after their scars. This is particularly important as you're starting to increase physical activity for those patients that have insensate areas, probably over scar tissue where they aren't able to feel any issues such as problems with rubbing and blisters. Extra socks are always handy, again, clean extra socks, making sure that we're able to address any volume issues. The compression sock, again, to address any swelling once the prosthetic limb has been taken off following activity. Always having a blister kit to hand for those rubs that do appear. We've had anecdotal stories from patients that have used napkin liners underneath their liner to help soak up a little bit more perspiration. However, this needs to be carefully monitored because any creases can again impact on someone's residual limb. They do have potential to move around during activity as well. And of course, there's various antiperspirant products on the market that a lot of patients have found quite useful as well. And again, this is something we hear quite a lot in clinic. I'll be more active with a better foot. I'm not doing that activity because I don't have this foot. I don't have a running blade, therefore I can't run. And actually, a lot of patients don't appreciate the fact that they can use their daily prosthesis for more sports and activities. There are activity-specific components which are there for when they're needed, which we'll come into later on in our webinar. But health and fitness is a key policy across the world, and this, hopefully, our presentation tonight will demonstrate just how important this is. Okay, over to Wally to discuss what the rest of the webinar.
Thank you very much. So Rachel's explained why we should do high activity and why our patients should do high activity. So what do they need to do high activity? Well, first of all, there's the interface. This is kind of critical. This is the kind of where socket and skin meet. So there's various different options for the interface of the prosthetic device. The socket, that's once again always up for debate. What's the best socket design? We'll discuss a bit about that shortly. Then also you need a prosthetic knee if you're a transfemoral patient. You need a prosthetic foot most of the time if you're seeing one in one of our clinics. Also, quality of residual limb can have a big impact on how much people can do, as Rachel said. And it's amazing how much a socket can change. You may have a socket that someone's worn for years that's the most comfortable socket they've ever worn. As soon as they start to do anything beyond the norm, it immediately becomes not quite as good as maybe it once was. And then also training. This is the key point. This is why we have physiotherapists on our team now, because training is key. Because just because you have a running foot does not make you a runner, as I think quite a lot of people have found out after 1912. So where do we begin? Well, we begin with liners and interfaces. So obviously the interface between the residual limb and the prosthesis, key point here, as Rachel said, you either want to eliminate sweating as best you can, make your life as comfortable for people as best you can, as well. And even back as far as 1999, you can see that there was a study that recommended silica for athletic activity or for those who have skin conditions. So the type of material that you pick can also really help as well. When we come to socket suspension, obviously sockets all of a sudden have to cope with higher forces rather than just walking loading. They're actually dealing with kind of high impact loading all the time now. People's change in shape and volume is more likely to occur after they've done a bout of high activity because it's not the norm, it's the normal thing that they do. Adjustability is key as well because people's legs do change in volume. So having a socket that can last a little bit longer can also perhaps help with that as well. And then also auxiliary suspension, there's no harm in maybe adding something else just to make sure. So for example, with steering liners for transtibials, they may proper suspension sleeve on, or even a little bit of locking liner as well. For transfemorals, there's sorts of other different socket designs you may be able to explore in order to add some auxiliary suspension to that as well. So we're just going to have a brief look at some liners now. So obviously we have a whole range of ice-rust liners. I'm just going to talk to just three liners that we kind of see used more often than not in sports prosthesis or high activity prosthesis. First is ice-rust sport. It kind of goes with the name really. This is our first high activity liner that we had. This is a locking liner, but you can also change the distal part to a cushion liner as well. The main benefit of the ice-rust sport liner is that this distal connection here, so the umbrella, is actually made out of aluminium rather than kind of a plastic material. So it's actually really quite durable and really very, very stiff. So people that do try ice-rust sport liners find they get much more reduced pistoning with this compared to some other locking liners. But ideally, we don't see a huge amount of pin lock liners being used for sports prosthesis or high activity prosthesis, because most of the time people would tend to use cushion liners in the sleeve. We have a high active cushion liner called ice-rust Activa. This is quite a unique liner, by the way. It's actually thicker down the front of the tibial crest. So here we have the front part. It's actually about 6 millimeters thick here, but posteriorly it's only 2 millimeters. So it means it folds up really nicely behind the knee, but you have all the cushioning down the tibial crest where you actually need it. With the addition of the wave feature, makes the flexibility a lot easier, and you obviously pair that with some kind of suspension seat and a valve in order for such suspension. Next final one we have is a new hybrid liner that we've just launched, which is Sealing X Locking. So this is actually a hybrid suspension. We have sealing and we also have a lock. So this is kind of belts and braces. And sometimes people that maybe haven't got on with a cushion liner in the sleeve, this may be the answer to them. So those are kind of the three main liners that we tend to see being used in sports prosthesis today. Then we get to socket design. So I think you can do a lot of research on sockets. You can read about socket shapes. But at the end of the day, the best socket design is that the one that your patient is comfortable with. So there's a lot to explore. Sometimes the first socket that you make for high active prosthesis is not the perfect one, but you have to start somewhere. And you have to work with your patient in order to gain information from them, what they want, and also you will learn something at the same time as well. So in 2001, looking at narrow ML sockets with true flexible materials. This is a rigid carbon frame with a flexible brim around the very, very top. Moving on into the kind of innovative socket designs that we have now. For example, we have the direct socket CF, which has a pure flexible silicon brim. So it's flexible all the way around the top, but rigid everywhere else. So this is a really quite a quick socket to make. Can actually be really handy for people in high active sport because they more often than not do reduce in volume faster rather than slower. To be able to make them new sockets quickly can actually really, really help. So flexible brim top, quite good to make. And also we have the transtibial version as well. So once again, a quick method of making sockets. But someone else who has a few sockets to show is also Felix over in Germany. He's just going to show a few different designs.
Thanks, Ollie. Yeah, just uncovering last socket, his day-to-day prosthesis. He's wearing basically a brimless socket with his day-to-day prosthesis, and he feels like super comfortable with it. He has an HTV inner socket for the comfort and the friction, of course. He's not using a liner, it's a direct skin socket with a regular expulsion valve. But actually for his sports prosthesis he's wearing just now, Christoph from Orthopädie Müller made a BOA system to basically adjust a bit how much connection or how stable the connection should be, and of course for comfort. He tried to make it a bit more lightweight, but in general there's not like the argument to have a socket for sports prosthesis. It has to be comfortable. It has to have like a good connection, and of course needs to be comfortable as well.
Perfect.
So there's
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Thanks, Felix. I can see it's raining there, so I'll let you get inside. So socket design, it's down to the patient, down to you as well, and it's quite a fun learning process. Always set yourself time aside to develop sports prosthetics. That's where the fun is really. So then we come to prosthetic feet. So this is obviously the key point of contact with the ground. And there was a survey done all the way back in 1985. So you can see not entirely up to date clinical evidence that we have here, but it's all that we have. So we have to relate to some things. And people are asked, they were surveyed on their lower-end prosthetic devices, and they were asked what function was missing, and also what improvements would they like to see to their quality of life. And the main results that came out of this study was the need for ability to move quickly and to run. And the prosthesis was not responsive enough, and they blamed the foot. There we go, in bold letters there. So you can see that there was more work to be done in 1985. But funnily enough, I should think most of the time people still hear that today, that if I had a better foot, I could do better. Probably comes down to a bit of training. However, prosthetic feet do actually mean quite a bit of difference. So we're going to have a closer look at some prosthetic feet now. So we've got two main feet that we're just going to focus on. We obviously have our ProFlex range. I could spend a few hours talking about ProFlex range, but for now we're just going to focus on the ProFlex XC torsion and also the ProFlex pivot, because these are kind of two main feet. And even though we talk about high activity, walking is some people's high active thing that they do. So you may have seen a picture of a set of staircase. Sometimes it's just a set of stairs for you, but for another person it could be Mount Everest. So having a bit of a closer look at these feet, we can see ProFlex pivot that we have here. Multi-articulating ankle, 3 pivot designs, three carbon blades, 27 degrees of ankle motion. So this is split into 9 degrees of plantar flexion, 18 degrees of dorsiflexion. So we always have more dorsiflexion of feet than we do plantar flexion. Twice the amount of energy return as a standard Varioflex, which I think you all would have known. Also very, very mobile, great foot for walking over uneven terrain, hiking, up and down mountains, etc. And all the social outdoor activities that people would do. The next one I just want to focus on is ProFlex XC torsion. And the main reason for this is because this has the addition of a torsion and a shock unit. So this has a shock unit which gives you around about 5 or 6 millimeters of compression, but also it has rotation in it, which is about 30 degrees in each direction. So this can help absorb a lot of different socket forces as well. And we're just going to have a quick look at Jordan. He's just going to, who has his ProFlex XC torsion on. So we're just going to ask Jordan to pop his leg on, and we're just going to ask him to go for a walk outside. I say outside, out into the physio area, we shall call it this evening. Just getting himself set there. Lovely. So as Jordan walks off, you'll be able to see it's a perfectly smooth walking foot, great for everyday use. In fact, it's Jordan's preferred foot. He's tried a lot of different feet, but this is the one that he's actually picked more over the top of some of the other feet. So you can see everyday walking, he can walk perfectly normally. So standard walk. And then as he comes back, he can also break into a small jog. It's a bit of a jog as you come back, Jordan. Perfect. So it's perfectly serviceable in order to use multiple activities with, and it has it's really one foot that people no longer have to change day in, day out in order to do different activities. Nice. And on that note.
So Jordan, keep that one on for now. We'll go back out into the physio area. And what we're going to have a little look at is with Jordan's walking foot, is actually just how he's walking. So again, we want to focus on our basics before we start looking at any sort of running and jogging. So we need to make sure that our patients are walking properly first. So when we have a look at Jordan here, what we're going to do is just observe his gait and ensure that he has good enough trunk rotation. We're going to look at his arm swing. So as he comes back towards us, we can have a little look at that. And he's now increasing his arm swing for us. But we can also have a little look at his pelvis rotation. We'll come to that looking at some of the other feet a little bit later on. If he goes onto the ladder for us, you can see that, again, we're looking at balance and ensuring coordination here. So you can step one foot inside and then back out. Keep going. That's it. And then it's going to go a little bit faster when he comes back. So we're just ensuring that our patients are able to actually really increase the level that they're able to do on their daily walking leg before we look at progressing them on to something more activity specific as well there. And then he's going to do a little bit of hopping as well as he turns back. So again, what we're looking at with this is ensuring that he's building up the strength on both legs. But you can see he's got really nice control on that side and he's not falling over from his upper body as well. Thank you, Jordan. Okay, we'll come back to Ollie.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks very much. So Coflex XC torsion, great everyday foot, also can be used for a variety of sporting activities as well. The next foot we're just going to briefly go over is Cheetah Explore. So the Cheetah Explore is quite a unique foot because it's we call it a crossover foot or a hybrid foot. So it's actually based on one of our original Cheetah feet, so the Cheetah original. Main difference is that this one can be worn with a foot shell or it can be worn in a shoe, and it's actually an everyday foot, so it's a walking foot that you can run on rather than a running foot that you can walk on. Really high energy return, a really dynamic push off as well. The main benefits about this is it's also waterproof if you laminate it to the socket. So it can be some person's multi-activity foot. So they may have gone away on holiday or away for work and they've had to take a couple of different legs with them because they've had to do a kind of walking around a lot, and then they also do the water leg as well. Maybe they want to go for a running, you can take a running leg. This foot now covers all the bases of everything. It's really, really quite unique. It's incredibly lightweight. It's only 646 grams. So it's really quite lightweight in order to use. It's quite unique in its design. So the actual Cheetah Explorer itself always comes as one size. So it always comes as size 30. The main difference is that you have to grind it down to the size that you want. If you're using a foot shell, you grind it 2 sizes smaller. If you're not using a foot shell, you can actually use a polyurethane something. It just looks like a flat polyurethane sole. You just bond it onto the bottom of the foot and then you grind that around the shape of the patient's shoe. So it can still be worn with shoes. The benefit of this is there's no foot shell in order to gather all the dirt or grime. So people do trail running or they do go in water with it. The foot shell's not there to gather all the water up at all or anything like that. When we say they're only laminated to the back of the socket, we mean something that looks like this. So you can see that it's nice tidy design, there's no bolts on it. There is another option, you can actually bolt this onto the socket as well. The issue with that is it leaves a little bit of waterproofness and also it doesn't look quite as neat. If you wear a suspension sleeve over the top, you have the issue that the bolts are sticking through the actual sleeve over time as well. But Jordan's quickly put his Cheetah Explorer on, so we're just going to make sure it's well into that, and then once again just go for a bit of a walk and then we'll hopefully be able to see Jordan run back again as well. There we go, that's the physio area. So normal walking, absolutely fine. These legs, even though they're kind of high active legs, are set up to the correct length, so you don't ever make them longer like you do some of our other feet we'll talk about later. It's up to the normal length, but if he wants to break into a sprint, absolutely no problem at all. And the nice thing about this foot, having a shoe on and a foot shell as well, just means that you don't have to stop and change legs at any time after that. Great.
Yep. So again, we're going to go back to Jordan in the physio room now. Again, with this, as Ollie said, because we have a complete foot plate on it, we're able to walk normally heel to toe, as well as be able to do some of the high activity stuff like running. So if Jordan just goes over to the cones for me, he's going to do some slightly multi-directional change there. So we're going to run from one cone to the other and go in a bit of a zigzag. So he's going to go all the way around the cones. And you can see he doesn't have to stop. He's taking nice tight turns around the cones that he wants to start with. And you can see you can just keep on going like that. And he's not losing any energy there. He's getting some nice energy return from the foot as well. And if he comes back through, you can see him do exactly the same through the ladder as well. He's got some nice momentum coming back off. Explore. You can see that he's getting a nice bounce off and he's able to keep moving and not having to keep stop starting, which means that we're actually evening out the weight distribution and he's not having to impact so harshly onto his sound side.
Brilliant. So the Cheetah Explorer is a great foot. It is a little bit of an involved manufacture, but that's part of the fun. So looking at the way that the foot is, it's very, very lightweight. Obviously being bonded to the back of the socket, it has to be aligned in the correct place. We get a lot of questions about alignment. We often help with a lot of alignment as well. One of the nicest things about this fit, as you can see here on the side here, that you actually only need a very, very small amount of build height in order to fit a very, very long spring in. So when you think about SIMS patients, high active SIMS patients with really long lever arm, sooner rather than later they start hammering their way through stiffer, low profile feet with every kind of 6 weeks or so, because it just can't cope with the forces that go through it. Then you pop a Cheetah Explorer on the back, there's much longer spring, much more flexible, but much more dynamic, a lot more range of return as well. So it can be really quite long build heights as well. So in terms of kind of alignment guides, we do actually have a really nice video that we can show. This is actually available on our YouTube channel or on our website as well. And this is essentially through stage by stage how you go about aligning a Cheetah Explorer. Once you've done a few, it actually becomes quite easy. We do actually go a bit back to the old school. So what we're going to do here is we're going to trace around the person's current prosthesis with a marker pen on a piece of paper. It sounds a bit old, but it does actually work incredibly well. So all you're doing here is you're capturing the alignment. You're also going to mark on the socket where kind of you have highlights, so the posterior wall, and also the patellar tendon area as well. And then you're going to mark the same, but with the shoe off, and then that gives you alignment. So once you have the Cheetah and everything ready to go, you can overlay the two on the piece of paper and get the correct alignment. We'll just skip forwards a little bit here. Okay. So bond the sole plate on, you can then grind this around the shape of the insole of the patient's shoe. So you can take the insole out of the shoe and you can just grind it around so it fits in the shoe. So even though there is no foot shell, we're using the sole plate, you can still wear it with a pair of shoes instead, which makes it a little bit different to some of the other feet as well. We're then going to overlay the two here. So you can see we've overlaid the socket and the foot on the piece of paper. We're going to bond the two together, and then this gives us the correct alignment. What we have in here as well is we have a very small wedge, and the reason for that is that they want the socket to be about 5 to 7 degrees extended, which sounds a bit odd, but it really helps the footwork. They're quite mobile feet. If your alignment line's not quite right, the chances are that the patient feels the toes a little bit soft. So 5 to 7 degrees extended generally helps us pretty well with that. And we're going to bond it onto the back of the socket. There's 2 different ways of doing this. I prefer to use our potting epoxy and also a glass reinforced bandage, whereas the other way of doing it is you can use the 2-part epoxy that comes in the Cheetah Explorer itself. It's a plus series carbon composite here. Excuse me, and that's strong enough in order to walk on. So when we see the guy coming up here, there we go. I'm going to try it on. Yeah. This is not a small guy, he's a big Icelandic boy. As you can see, there's more than strong enough in order to do that. And then once it's finished, you can just laminate over the top of that. And that's where more questions lie. How do you laminate this straight to the back of the socket? And on that note, I would say that we actually have another video we could send you that takes you through stage by stage. This is actually made by one of our customers that shows how to do it, because they do this a lot. So it's a really nice stage by stage guide, comes in text as well as video format too. So if you need technical help for anything like this, we can happily help you with that. And the video does often help more than kind of a written IFU as well. So we can send this out as and when you need to, and it just takes you through even the layups as well, just how to lay up that actual stuff. Rachel.
Thank you. So just a little roundup for walking prosthetic feet with our patients. We want to make sure that they can walk before they can run. We're going back to basics, ensuring that we are getting a nice, good walk, and also ensuring that we're actually achieving the right level of activity for our patients prior to discharge. Otherwise, if they're not quite in the right state, in that right stage to progress with their higher levels of activity, do we have a planned follow-up for them? We want to make sure that our patients are actually ready for that change of lifestyle. I know a lot of us in January will turn around and say, yes, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to go every day, I'm going to get really fit and toned. Do we do it? No. And that's because we're not ready for that change of lifestyle. It's not just about being more active, it's about having better sleep and recovery, better diet, and also having that internal motivation to change as well.
Perfect. So at this point, does anyone have any questions, Katie?
We don't have any in the Q&A so far, but
perfect.
Feel free to... Oh, one's just popped in. Is it painful for a person running or walking in the prosthesis? I mean, does the end of the leg or bone feel higher loading than in a situation of having their whole leg? I think that is what the question asks for. So I think it's basically saying, with the higher loading, would the user feel more pain when running or walking in their prosthesis?
I would say no, because the socket's still designed to transfer weight to other parts of the soft tissue or residual limb, and also most of the time higher active prosthetic devices have more built-in shock absorption as well, which can also help take some of the load away from maybe the ground contact that you might have with some basic walking prosthetics. Hopefully not would be key. If it does, I would say revisit your socket design, and that would definitely help.
Yeah, I think what a lot of patients will find afterwards is that when they start being more active and they're starting to put higher loading on, that actually they're probably reducing in volume, and if they're then, that can then, so it's just something to keep an eye on. Keep hold of those extra socks at hand.
Great, that's answered your question.
Thank you very much. More questions are Marianne. So moving on to some prosthetic feet now. Prosthetic running feet. So we've been through everyday walking feet. We're now going to look at specific feet for running. So running and sprinting can kind of be seen as two different things. Running is seen as a bit more recreational, around the park with your family and your kids, whereas sprinting is like a full pelt as fast as you can go, basically. So we're going to start with the probably most well-known running foot on the planet, the Flex Run. It's one of the first ones ever made as well, so it's well used around about the world. We've had a few different designs. This is the latest one, so it now matches all of our sports prosthesis with the yellow stripe down the side of it. In terms of looking at the Flex Run design itself, it's going to pick one up here. So the Flex Run itself has been redesigned a few times, as I said. It now looks like so. This has replaceable sole. Once again, new design that we have now. So the latest design has yellow on the bottom. This is a much better cross-trail sole than we ever had before. So for muddier terrain, it actually is a lot better. They're easy to replace. They just slide on and off. So if people do wear them out, they're quite easy to swap over. The good thing about these is if someone doesn't like this sole, which is okay, then you can just use their own trainer on the bottom of that too. On the top of the foot, we have this carbon disc. Now, when you order one of these feet new, this carbon disc doesn't come bonded to the foot itself. It actually is the point of which you can get rotation from. So it actually comes separate. The way that you need to do it is you have a pyramid obviously on the top, so male or female, the choice is yours. And then as you put your socket on, you can just put some flip or something underneath that. And when you get the correct alignment, then you can bond the carbon disc in place, which means that actually rotation set. So if you do have a really short build height and you can't get rotation with any adapters between the foot and the socket, that's the best place for your adapter as well. So in terms of design, the way that the Flex Run works, that all our kind of sports feet act a little bit like a hinge. So all of the function happens around this back part of the foot. So it does this more so than the whole thing curling up. When you see some of our previous designs of Flex Run, the whole foot used to kind of curl up like a letter C, which was good. It gave a lot of shock absorption, but you also missed out on a lot of energy return at the same time as well. Flex Run only comes in one size. I'd say two sizes actually. We do have a junior version as well, which I'll get to. And then when we come to Flex Run usage, Jordan has now luckily got his Flex Run in place. So we're just going to pop over to Jordan to see him running around on his Flex Run. There we go, lovely. So we'll head out into the physio area again. I think just have a little jog there. So the main thing about this Flex Run is it doesn't have a heel, as you can see. It's only a toe-loaded prosthesis. You can see there's much more shock absorption with the Flex Run compared to the other 2 feet that we tried before. But even though there's a lot of shock absorption, this is exactly why you have to set the sports prosthesis up a little bit longer, because you can see Jordan running there. It's actually very, very smooth. His shoulders are level, his hips are still level, and everything is working as it should. Perfect.
So just as Jordan's out there, I'm just going to explain a little bit about how we would get our patients to start off running on their Flex Run. So hopefully we can run through a few drills already on their walking leg, just to make sure that they're actually nice and stable. They're not going to be developing many compensations from the start. And then as we start to build up patients' confidence when we set them up on Flex Run, as you can see with Jordan, if we switch to his camera, we can see that he's actually very good already on his Flex Run. However, a lot of patients won't like being right up onto the toes because there's no heel plate. So if Jordan just faces the wall, we can see that he's up onto his toes. He's going to use a bit of arm support there, and he's just going to bounce up on and off the foot. So this just starts to build up the confidence, gives the patient the feeling of how it should feel to be bouncing on that foot, and actually encourage some stability and some control from around the knee and the hip. And there's a lot of work we can do there around posture and controlling that. From there, we then will bounce a little bit further on and off the foot. So Jordan doesn't need to use hand support for this, but he's got a wall there if he needs a little bit of support. It's just bouncing on and off, one onto the other. That's it. And you can see Jordan's very comfortable with that, but straight away some of our patients perhaps won't be. Good. So then moving on from there, we want to practice a little bit of forwards lean as well to be able to get our patients moving into that. So I'm just going to pop my mask on and come over to Jordan.
Taking on a bit of resistance, but enough that we can still keep moving forwards. Good. And what we're doing now, as well as providing a bit of support and confidence, we're also building up a little bit of strength around the patient's hips there as well.
And so that would be how we start off, building up the patient's confidence and support with them on the flex run. As you can see with what Jordan was doing, we can do not only straight line running, there's also a little bit of a flexibility to be able to do some more agility type stuff. So with the juniors, they quite often use these as a sort of multi-sport prosthesis, and they can play football with them and run around in the playground as well as children like to do. Okay, back to Ollie.
Thanks very much. So obviously we also need to talk about prosthetic knee joints. We have a few options from Össur. The cheetah knee is a new running knee that we have. It's actually been around for a few years. Maybe people didn't know they existed, but we do have a cheetah knee. Total knee 2100 is a great everyday knee that people can also do high activity on as well. Also upper 7 passo knee and also rear knee XC. So we see a guy here running on his rear knee XC. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a good running knee, but you can run on it. So it's a knee that you can run on. So if you need to put a burst of speed on, absolutely no problem at all with the XC. But there are better knees if you did want a knee specifically made for running as well. So the two knees we're going to visit today, we have cheetah knee, which I have one here. So this is a small cheetah knee, it's quite low profile. We also have a passo knee as well. Both knees are polycentric. The main benefit of that is one, they're incredibly stable on heel strike or loading, but also they have mid-swing shortening. So when you are setting up a running prosthesis and your leg is a little bit longer, then these can really help stop you from catching the toe through. And who's going to help us out with more of these? That guy is Felix. So we're going to pass over to Felix and Rachel, who's going to do some running around the track with Lars, who has had a blade and a cheetah knee for a small amount of time.
Thank you. So just while Felix is getting ready, we're going to chat a little bit about transfemoral running. So as you can see, Lars is all set up there. We have the passo knee and the flex run on. Now the passo knee can be used as a day-to-day prosthesis, and can be successfully used in the gym for a little bit of light jogging and building up to faster speeds, and that could be with something like the ProFlex XC torsion as well, and that they're quite a nice combination. But today we have the flex run on with Lars. So to start with, I would usually use this as looking at the walk to jog transition. Now Lars, we have already seen sort of running around on this previously, so we know he knows how to do it. But this is sort of the big thing for a lot of our above knee patients. So we can see that as Lars is starting to walk there, what he needs to do is be able to feel the control of the knee, know at what point it's going to flex, so that he feels confident that it's going to bend as he's running. Now there are other options, of course, if you don't want the knee to bend, but today we're going to focus on one that does. So we can see that he's getting comfortable on that. He's landing quite flat onto his other side, so we'll probably have a little closer look at that. But again, this is something where you can assess whether or not the height is right for the patient. If they're already struggling with a slightly longer T length, then we might need to have a little look at that. quite often when we're starting to set patients up on the flexion in particular, they may feel like it's too long to begin with and won't actually load it enough and allow the knee to bend. So this is something we need to work on before we can start moving into a bit more of a jog. So if all starts to pick up a little bit of speed now. Good, and you can go into a little bit of a jog for us here. And the key with this really is to start building up from a slow walk into a bit of a jog and just gradually getting that speed up. And what I did earlier with Jordan with the resistance band around the waist, again, we can do this with our transfemoral users also. Great. So one of the big things with our transfemoral users in particular is to ensure that they're getting the right pelvic rotation. So if Lars just goes back into a bit of a walk for us, and we focus in around his pelvis, we want to make sure that actually he's getting that left hip forward enough to allow the knee to bend. And you can see the knee bending, so we know he is, but we can work quite a lot on the early stages, providing a bit of resistance there, as I say, with a band or with some hand-on support from the therapist. Quite often we know that because the hamstrings have been cut during the transfemoral amputation, we know that there's some weakness there quite often, which allows the pelvis to tilt. The abs are usually a little bit weaker there and cause even more tilting. So we know that the psoas will tighten. However, if we keep trying to stretch the iliopsoas, it's still not addressing that initial issue. So we really do need to ensure that our patients are bulletproof before we're starting to work them a lot harder and putting more load through. We know that on the prosthetic hip side, that there's 2 to 3 times more work going through that hip. It's a major energy generator. And will compensate for the lack of plantar flexion there. So we need that hip to be nice and strong. We're going to leave Lars and Felix for a moment so they can switch over onto the cheetah knee and the exceed foot, which Ollie will talk a little bit more about in a second.
Perfect, thank you. So Felix is just going to change the prosthetics over to cheetah and exceed. Also, I have to say, Felix, nice pumpkins there as your running track guides as well. Really great to see this. Bit of humour of this song here, going to go the next. So Katie, does anyone have any questions on?
Yes, we have a few in the chat. So I have one here more, I think, about suspension. How is the prosthesis fitting without falling off? And does the user never feel a space between the skin and the prosthesis? And in the same question, does the socket squeeze the leg, I think it's saying, and always stay tightly to it? So I think it's just talking about fluctuations during high activity sports is essentially the question, I believe.
Okay, I'll try and answer all that in one. so the largest leg is actually skin suction, so it actually has to be perfectly matched in volume. It just means then that there should be no air gaps at all. If there's an air gap, the socket doesn't fit properly as well. In terms of contact with the skin all the time, if you have a liner, so one of our Astros liners, for example, this is always in contact with the leg at all times. So there should be no chance that air can get between this and the skin at all. And especially if you have like a suction socket with physics control air out of the socket as well. We do have certain things like vacuum pumps as well that can be put onto prosthetic devices, which eliminate air as well. And then in terms of volume adaptability, something like the Sealing X liner, that has a variety of different seals. We even have one seal called the volume seal. And obviously that does what it says in the tin, it adjusts for volume. And what that does is quite a big seal. So as the patient's residual starts to lose a little bit of volume, that seal can expand against the wall of the socket, and then it just means it's not going to drop off anywhere. So with skin suction sockets, you do have to be quite critical in your volume, but with non-suspended sockets, if the devices are there in order to help cope with some volume changes, and then that can mean the fact that keeps the socket on. So for example, this seal here, this is the edge that attaches to the wall of the socket by suction. And you can see how much movement we have moving away from the wall of the seal and keeps that into contact at all times. So there's a small amount of chance of it.
Great, and another one here from Tori. Is it ever useful to set up a TF user without the knee joint for fitting and training and then introduce the knee joint later? And if so, when is best to introduce the knee joint?
I'm going to pass that on to Rachel.
That's a great question. Thanks, Tori. I think it all depends on your user. I think you need to be able to have the strength to control the knee joint, as well as the understanding of how it works and how to control that. Certainly if you've got someone who's perhaps not as confident or wants to be sure that they're getting the right technique from the foot first, then we can do that. So it looks like Felix and Lars are ready here on the cheetah knee and the exceed foot, so you'll hear more about the foot soon. Now the cheetah knee is a great knee that can be more of a sport specific setup. This is a great knee to use at the gym for various movements and classes and things there. It's also a nice running knee. You'll hear a little bit more about the exceed foot in a little while. But with this one, what we're doing again, it's a very different type of knee that users might be used to on a day-to-day leg. So they need to understand where the stability comes from with the knee and at which point the knee is going to flex here. So again, I start off a lot with understanding and building that confidence in similar ways to how we did with the flex front to start with. So because with the exceed, there's a lot stiffer carbon. So as Lars starts to walk, you can see that actually it probably doesn't compress quite as much as the flex run did. We see a slightly different bounce from it. So for this, we would actually probably use it more for straight line running. It's not quite as easy to use along with the different types of agility and change of direction. However, as Lars starts to pick up a little bit of speed here, again, you can see he has to get right onto the toe to bring that hip over. And again, we can see we've got quite a nice flip forward into extension now. He's not having to wait a long time for it. However, when we do look at our transfemoral amputees running, what we can see is that gait deviations are a lot more obvious, particularly as they start to pick up speed. So I think Lars is going to try and pick up a little bit of speed here, I think. If you can keep up with it. There we go, we're running along now. And what we can see from the other side as well is that actually, if we get higher hip flexion or faster hip flexion, that also helps us bring up a little bit of speed there as well. And you can see nicely as Lars, even as he slows down here, we've got some nice arm swings still. He's really having to power those arms through to help with that rotation. Well, thanks guys. So one of the big things when we're switching between blades and different feet is that the patients need to understand the different feel of the blade, at what point they feel like they need to be able to actually contact the floor with it, and also the difference in load as they're going up, the increase in load that they're putting through the blade as they're building confidence on it as well.
Great. So looking on to some other sports feet that we have as well. So now on to sprinting. So this kind of full pelt running. And I was almost watching Lars run Felix catch after on that previous clip. So here we have three cheetahs. We have cheetah original, which is in the bottom right here. In the middle, cheetah extend, and then the top one is the cheetah extend. So looking at cheetah original, this one's obviously our original cheetah. You can see the design, they all look kind of fairly similar. They're all very much of a J-shaped design of foot. So with the cheetah original, really great for people that kind of transitioning from a flex run to maybe something a bit more dynamic, such as one of the other cheetahs, or for teenagers or someone coming off a walking leg that wants to learn to run. It's not as kind of forceful in its energy return as some of the other feet as well. Also, it can have fit the shortest build height in this because it has the longest pylon at the back. Then moving on, we have the cheetah extend. Great foot for bilateral running because it's a little bit easier to control compared to some of the other cheetahs that we have. It's not quite as forceful as the cheetah extreme. Distance-wise, 400 meters to 10 Ks, and then it can use a few unilaterals as well, but we tend to see this more with bilaterals than anyone else. Also really good for people that want maybe a bit more energy return from a foot, and then if they have a flex run before, they feel at the end of the race, they feel like they want a bit more energy return, and that's where the cheetah extend comes in. And then finally, cheetah extreme, the big one. So this is the biggest sprint that we have, purely for sprinting, 100 to 200 meters. Johnny Peacock's won twice on this, so it has its own pedigree as well. And the way that these feet work is this: the posterior part is stiff and solid for connection to the socket. All the function comes from this posterior curve as well. With these feet, we have a couple of helpful items. We have an alignment adapter. So this is just an adapter that you can use in order to set up these because they are a little bit alignment critical. So the foot will clamp in the back here, and then on your socket, you would just bond this onto the back, and it gives you a chance to adjust the alignment, and then you can change the height. You can also change ab and abduction as well. Has a drilling guide for drilling if you are going to bolt it, and with the pyramid connector, you also change toe in, toe out, part flexion as well. And then the other final thing that we have with these feet is the Nike spike plate. So this is bonded on. So the reason why we bond it on is because the last thing you want to happen when someone's sprinting full pelt is the sole slips. So bonding it on means that's never going to happen. It has a lot of spike connections on the bottom. The reason for that is it gives people choices where they put their spikes. There's obviously rules about how many spikes you can use per foot. This just means that they can maybe use the front 5 if needed. But these are available with the feet, or you can also squeeze on a Nike sole with the flex one if you want the trainer version. But then we don't want to let adults have all the fun, so we have a range of junior solutions as well. So looking at the other types of feet that we have a junior flex run. This also will cover some adult categories as well. So if you do have people of short stature that need a running foot, the junior flex run will fit them. We also have a really cute junior cheetah, which looks similar to the adult version. And then finally, we have a junior cheetah explore. And the benefit of this is that it comes with replaceable sole plates. You can grind the heel and the toe down to the size that you want. And if the kid's foot grows, you can just get a new sole plate and then you can make the foot bigger. Incredibly lightweight, waterproof. Is a foot for kids, because the last thing kids want to do is stop and change their legs at every given opportunity. So really quite helpful products for kind of our young adults there as well. Katie, any questions?
Yes.
Wow.
Question here from Hannah. Do you need to increase the extension assist significantly for running versus walking, or does the increase in speed provide enough extension force?
A little bit of both, to be honest. It also depends on the lead joint that you use. But in everyday walking, like normal walking knee, such as a Total 2100, it does actually have a flexion limiter in it that the patient can turn up and down themselves. But generally, the specific things, they're set to kind of the speed that people run at. So they're sometimes a little bit stiff for walking with, but they're fine for running. So yes, you do, but it does depend a bit on the components that you have.
So we're just about to run a little over time, but bear with us, we are almost done. So just for a little bit of a roundup from a physio and training point of view, what we're looking at here really, especially with the sort of stiffer blades, is we're looking at running technique really specifically. And this might be at a point where as physios, we actually probably get in touch with a more specific running coach, maybe local to the patient that they perhaps want to get joining. We want to make sure that actually prescription's exercise specific. So do our patients want a leg to wear in the gym, or do they want a running leg? There's two very different setups there that we can look at, but actually there are very specific gym legs that we've set up in the past that we can actually use for running as well. And also we need to be aware of compensations. Our patients need to be able to, as our British athletics colleagues have said, earn the right. And this means not only going up with some of their exercises, but also the category and the stiffness of the blade as well. You need to be able to control the blade and the energy return that they get back from it. So there's no point in putting someone on a really stiff blade to start with, and actually they can't control it, and it just ends up being like a very heavy leg for them. But it also means that from a compensation point of view, we're spending a lot of time on uneven blades. And this also can have compensations and problems developing, such as back pain. So we need to ensure that that time is being managed as well. Okay, back to Ollie.
Thank you very much. Now for a glimpse of the future. So we're keen to introduce you to our 3 new sports feet that we have coming up. Now we do have them on the shelf now, so if you do have a patient in mind, we can obviously get them. We haven't launched them yet. It's down to individual markets when they actually get launched. Ours are coming. Ask Katie, she can tell you in the chat, I hope. So first one we have is Cheetah XL. So this is our latest design of sprint foot. So you can see it's a much more aggressive curve design than our Extreme was. The nice thing about this now is we have 2 different heights. So this is the larger one, and we also have a smaller one as well. So if people are struggling with build height, then we can obviously fit a much shorter foot in too. So that's a foot for sprinters, so kind of the Johnny Peacock-esque type of level of amputee. Much longer toe, plant flex pylon, and you can also directly laminate this into the socket, or you can also bolt it on as well. Next foot we have is Cheetah Exceed. This is what you see Lars running on. This is like generation 2 flex run. It's a much taller flex run. The difference with this, you can see we always have this pre-flex pyramid. So rather than the foot looking like so, actually looks like this. So you can see that the back of the foot actually comes up a lot higher, meaning we actually have a much longer toe as well. Really great for triathlons, recreational running. If you also really good for transfemoral runners as well, because it's modular design, so it means you can easily bolt it onto different knees, such as well as these two that we have there. And then finally, we have tutor expand. So this is a foot that can take up a lot more high impact activities, such as long jumping. So you can see this actually looks like this. So it takes a little bit of alignment on the back of the socket due to the angle of the pylon that you have. This is the shorter version. We also have, excuse me here, I'm going to step back, the larger version as well. So we're really quite a large foot for this, for the taller long jumpers, because they tend to be quite tall, and also for transfemoral patients if we can attach it to the socket somehow. So it's a really nice thing to be able to offer a sports-specific foot. So this is purely for long jumping. And if we see here, Marcus Wren breaking the world record, 8.48 meters to jump, so round about here. So it's an amazing feat for a Paralympic athlete to jump that far, and he uses the stances we use for some time. For those that don't know, Marcus is also a prosthetist as well, so he sets his own sockets up, which makes my life easier. So we'll just pass it on to Marcus and away he goes.
Okay, so just as a little bit of roundup from physio here, we need to make sure that our patients are achieving the highest level of activity possible. And as those of you who might have joined in with Bob Gailey's talk last week would have heard him say, running is a physical need and everyone has the right to move. I think it's a key part of rehab and it's something we should be addressing. If you just imagine your typical day, I know ours involves walking down to the shops from the office here, and quite often we've got to run across the road. So even we need to be able to do that, and what's to say our patients won't have to do that as well. Being active is going to help maintain weight and help fight obesity as well, which again we know is a growing epidemic across the world, and we need to be able to keep our patients nice and safe and healthy as well. So in terms of some key takeaways that we can use with our amputee patients who are wanting to run, and this is before they come anywhere near any of the running games, we need to make sure that they've got adequate pelvic tilt control. That's both anterior, posterior, lateral and transverse. We need to make sure that they've got even arm swing and that they're not just marching and swinging their arms, they need to have the associated trunk rotation with it also. We need to make sure that they've got a nice strong core. Now, quite often, because the trans abs will be turning off through one reason or another, this is something that Pilates can address really nicely and fits into Bob Gailey's big 4 exercises, the transverse abs, bridging, 100s, and I can't remember the address. But we also need to make sure that the glute hip powerhouse as well is kicking in. So this is also going to feed into the next one, which is the knee control, and it's not just for transtibials, it's transfemorals as well, as we've discussed. But we need to make sure that the hip is driving up and over that knee to actually propel forward. And then we also have resistive gait training, as you saw me doing with Jordan just now. This is going to ensure that we've got both the core and the glutes strengthening together, working together, creating that powerhouse. And we're going to ensure that we've got that upper body rotation, the stability on the prosthesis as well as weight bearing through the prosthesis as well. It's surprising how easy this is with patients. And if you've ever tried it yourselves with a little bit of TheraBand or one of the parachutes that some of the athletes use, you'll actually feel how much quicker you can walk and run once you've had that resistance taken away as well. So it really does build some good confidence, and you get some positioning whilst working within some feedback whilst working within the correct positioning as well. Okay. So it's not all just about running either. Hopefully we've got that across to you a little bit tonight as well. So we want our patients to be able to fulfill whatever needs and dreams it is that they want to, and not every amputee is going to want to run like Johnny Peacock. So we have all these other activities as well, and hopefully along with the activities for fit prosthesis that we've seen today, as well as their day-to-day lives, we can help our patients fulfill that potential.
So in summary, we have a wide range of high activity feet, as I hope you've seen, in terms of everyday walking to moderately active running to the fastest sprint that people can possibly do. There's not one solution for every patient, which is why you often have experiment with socket designs, different feet categories, different foot types as well. Crossover fit can really be a great kind of bridge for them to walk a lot, and then also get into some high activity sports as well. Learning to use the prosthesis is vital. So as I said, if you do end up prescribing one of these devices, please get your physiotherapist involved. That's really key to make sure people can actually use the actual prosthetic as well. Joint physio and prosthetic sessions are key, and we are here to help. So if you ever need anything, down to helping set these things up, because it's not the sort of thing that you do day in, day out. Please just ask, and we shall be there for you. And on that note, while this video plays in the background of one of our child mobility clinics that was actually run in France, I'll just pass back to Katie and see if any final questions before we say our goodbyes.
We do have a couple more questions.
Excellent.
Is there a specific range of knee flexion swing angle that works best for above knee users while running? Would you recommend an angle to start with?
No, I think it's down to the patient and alignment, to be honest. I don't think there's any rule about that. It would more be about what suits their running style the best. But generally, we just set it up in neutral alignment and go from there.
Great, thank you. Feel free to pop any more questions in the box while the video is continuing. But thank you, team, and big thanks to Felix and Lars braving it out there in the in the October weather.
Ciao, guys. We're wrapping up. It's getting cold.
Thanks, Felix.
Thanks, guys.
I don't blame you. Thanks, Lars.
Bye.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you, guys. If anyone does have any other questions, feel free to email me, or you can pop it in the invite of the event, and that will get to us as well, and we can answer those. But as Ollie said, we're here to help you however we can in your trials to get your users more mobile. But thanks again for giving up your evening to join us. It's been great to have you, and hopefully we'll see you at one of our sessions soon. Thank you, Jordan. So yes, good evening, everyone. Take care, and we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.